welcome. Joining us right now is House Homeland Security Committee Chairman, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul. Mr. Congressman, good to see you. Mr. Chairman, good to see you.
Good morning. A little windy this morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hear the wind. Tell us what you're trying to do and your reaction to this in terms of the vetting of the refugees.
Well, I sounded the alarm about the Syrian refugees coming into the country under President Obama. The DNI, FBI Director, Secretary of Homeland all warned me that they couldn't be properly vetted, that they were a risk to the American people. So I'm glad to see now that we have a president and a secretary who's willing to ramp up the vetting procedures on these individuals before they come into the United States. I think this protects the American people. It's very common sense. We're a very generous country, but you don't want to bring in refugees from probably one of the hottest spots in the world where ISIS used to control and govern into the United States without the proper vetting.
But by the way, we should point out ISIS is largely on the run. Is that right?
Well, and this is the other, I think the president should talk about a couple of things. One, as Kevin McCarthy talked about, the tax cuts, priming the economy, the bonuses, I think 3 million bonuses now. ExxonMobil, $50 billion investment in the United States. But he should also, I think, very strongly talk about, I saw the rise of ISIS under my chairmanship for 6 years. The president then at that time, Obama, did virtually nothing to stop this. Within 1 year, this president has unleashed the generals and has defeated and crushed the caliphate in Iraq and Syria. And that's really not talked about enough.
How did he do that? So he just gave the power back to the generals to make the decisions?
He did. I think, President Obama didn't have a whole lot of interest. He called it the JV team, didn't take it seriously. I did as Homeland Security Chairman. I saw the threat coming into the nation, and he basically targeted them with the Kurds and the Delta forces that we put over there to do it. I always knew we could do it. We have the greatest military on earth. We just had a president that didn't have the political will. Now we do.
Wow.
Congressman, what the president says tonight on immigration is going to be very important, too. There are divisions among Republicans about how to go, divisions between Republicans and Democrats. Are we going to see a deal on immigration between the Republican Party and Democrats? And if so, what's it going to look like?
I hope so. Chairman Goodlatte and I have introduced a bill in the House. The majority of House Republicans support. I know the president's been negotiating with the Senate on another deal. I met with the secretary yesterday to see how can we get the House and Senate versions together. I think the 4 pillars that we talked about when I was in the White House with the president, that being border security has to be first and foremost. That's my bill. Chain migration, we have to deal with that issue. The lottery, which really makes no sense. If you go to New York, the 2 latest terror attacks that happened in New York came out of the chain migration and lottery system. And then finally, what is the DACA fix going to look like? I think you're seeing Republicans coming over to the fact we have to fix DACA. The question is path to citizenship and some of these other issues.
But, Congressman, I have a follow-up to that, though. There's one thing you didn't mention in those 4 pillars, and that is individuals overstaying, tourists who overstay their visas, who come to this country. 40% of illegal immigrants in this country are people who just overstayed their visas. In the most recent calendar year, according to the White House, it was nearly 750,000 people who wound up being illegal immigrants into this country, including many students. With the economy as good as it is, that makes it potentially an even greater problem for the United States with this happening. What are you going to do about it?
Excellent point. And this is how the hijackers got into the United States. They came in legally, overstayed their visas, and then pulled off 9/11.
Wow.
So that you're demonstrating why this is so important. And you're correct, about 40%. We talk about the southern border, but 40% of illegals come in legally and overstay. So in my bill, we have the U.S. exit program that the 9/11 Commission recommended.
What the government still hasn't acted on, right?
Well, we need to pass the bill.
Right.
And then the funding's important as well, which our bill does provide the funding to make this happen once and for all, because we don't know when they overstay. We don't know that all the time. We don't know when they're leaving. Excellent point.
Well, it also has to do with the sanctuary that they're getting in some ways, right? How is it possible that certain cities are able to just blow off the federal law and protect illegals, whatever the cost?
Well, and, I was a federal prosecutor when there's an ICE detainer on somebody because they were serving out a term or they, had a criminal case in front of them. The fact that some local law enforcement would not work with federal law enforcement when there is a detainer on them from the federal government is really a defiance. So in our bill, we just say, look, if you're not going to work with federal law enforcement and follow federal law, then we will not give you federal funding.
Can I come back to the four pillars that you were talking about? Can Republicans, conservatives get on board with a DACA deal, and can Democrats get on board with a chain migration deal? Do you think there's room for everybody to get together on?
Well, I thought the president made a very generous offer to the Senate Democrats, and some of them balked at that. So I'm the eternal optimist, but this is a very challenging, one of the most challenging negotiations I've seen. I thought in the room I was in, the president handled himself like the CEO of a boardroom, acting in a very bipartisan way, trying to bring both sides together in both House and Senate. And we'll see.
Put odds on it.
Yeah.
What's your number?
We may have to go to a conference committee on this. I mean, we do have a deadline, and that's in March when the DACA program expires. So it has some pressure on Congress. I still remain optimistic because the president is showing leadership on the issue.
And he's coming up with solutions. Go ahead, Christopher.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that you've been a border security guy, and you've also been pretty flexible with that. Your plan is a mixture of fences and technology and walls. And one of the things that's an issue in your state is a lot of that goes through private property.
Yeah.
How is the committee and DHS and your constituents been interacting with that, and how to get this wall built? We're also dealing with the sacred Alamo states' rights of private land.
Sure. And this is addressed in my bill. The president's talked about this as well, where you have natural barriers like, in Big Bend, you got a huge canyon. It's a natural barrier. Where you have a river. Maybe you can do these concrete levees, but there are creative ways to deal with that. The 2,000-mile wall could be metaphoric with technology and personnel as well. There will be physical barricades, and there will be a wall where it makes sense. It doesn't make sense in some areas on the border. I think the president's starting to understand that. And in my bill, we mandate the secretary take that into account.
So what can you tell about this? I mean, 75 illegal immigrants, including 13 children, were discovered crammed into the back of a tractor. These pictures are really incredible, actually. That when the driver was pulled over on a Texas highway, border agents have reportedly seen an increase in the use of tractor trailers for human trafficking. Mr. Chairman, isn't this one of those issues that the president's $25 billion border security plans hopes to fix? I mean, what can you tell us about this?
Well, I remember that case very well in San Antonio, and it was horrific. Children died in this 18-wheeler tractor trailer, and this is the kind of thing we want to prevent. This dangerous journey they make from Central America through Mexico, where they're exploited in many ways, then get to the border, $6,000 to $7,000 a head to get in, and then sometimes put into human trafficking and sort of indentured servants to pay off this debt. We need to close the legal loopholes that exist because right now, if you're from Mexico and Canada, we can deport you in an expeditious way. If you're from another country, we cannot do that.
Right, they come to the border. You can't even send them back.
And we give them a notice to appear at a hearing. They're resettled by HHS in all parts of the country, and 90% of them don't show up to the hearing.
Wow, okay. So then they're in the country, and then, are you tracking them, or we don't know where they are?
This is a failure of the former administration to just let them in the country. And we need to change, and we do, in the bill that I introduced with Chairman Goodlatte, address these legal loopholes that the secretary talks about. So, what the bottom line, Maria, is we don't want to be dealing with this 5 more years down the road. We want to deal with this in a holistic way with security and DACA and not have to deal with another DACA 5, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, we talk about the border in Texas right there. Well, where are most of the people coming from?
Most of them are actually coming from Central America.
Guatemala and...
yeah, and they, again, $6,000 a head to come across. So we've seen the numbers actually going up lately. And I think they want to get in before they see that there's going to be a stronger border security. They're trying to get in before that happens.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you, Maria.